Justin Trudeau wraps up his visit to India today. It was a trip that included a $1 billion new investment deal between India and Canada. And for more on the Prime Minister's roller coaster of a trip to India, we're joined now by Aarti Tikoo Singh. She is the Senior Assistant Editor at the Times of India in New Delhi. Aarti, from this vantage point, it seemed like a roller coaster visit for us, for the Prime Minister. But if you had to describe it in a single word or phrase, how would you describe Trudeau's visit to India?
Well, I would say that Prime Minister Trudeau's visit to India has been a colossal failure of diplomacy and leadership skills on his part. I think it's unprecedented in the history of international relations between two friendly countries that a Prime Minister has earned so much flack and ridicule by general public and by and cold shoulder by the government of India. I think it hasn't happened ever in the history of India. So I would say it's been a massive failure.
Okay, let's drill down a bit on that, because some would say that this $1 billion deal came out of it, that people enjoyed his appearances there. But there was one issue that certainly dogged him even before he got to India, which was this perceived, certainly perceived by some, that the Canadian government is sympathetic to the Sikh Khalistani movement. And then, of course, many of the members of his cabinet, his wife, were pictured with someone who is connected to the Khalistani movement, someone who was convicted of attempted murder, and he was there with the Canadian dignitaries in India. How do you perceive that and how that unfolded?
Exactly, for the same reasons. It is the trip has been a massive failure, because at the end of the day, you may say that there has been a deal, but it's a deal, completely insignificant deal in terms of the fact that other heads of state who visited India have had gained bigger deals from India. And none of the heads of state have faced such embarrassment in public the way Prime Minister Trudeau has. The second thing, at the end of the, this trip, overall, I would say Prime Minister Modi was able to prevail on Prime Minister Trudeau, whose politics, in fact, got exposed in India. The politics of, I would say, regression and the politics of appeasement of religious groups and minority, extremist groups. I think Prime Minister Trudeau's advisors did not clearly advise him well about what really is India touchy about as far as Indo-Canadian relations are concerned.
Aarti, let me jump in for a second, because what we heard from the Prime Minister is that he supports the right of people to have self-determination. He does not support violence or extremism. So what's wrong with that? He supports free speech, essentially.
Well, there is a difference. The fact that, this gentleman who was invited to the dinner party at Canadian High Commission in Delhi and was part of the Prime Minister Trudeau's delegation was an ex-terrorist of Sikh Khalistani extremist movement in India. He wasn't just any other person who had a certain point of view. He was a convicted ex-terrorist. The second thing about Prime Minister Trudeau's politics is that he seems to be close to the Khalistani elements in Canada, and Khalistan is a major issue in India, because in the 80s, Khalistan movement was not just a demand for self-determination. It was religious terror in Punjab, one of the important states in India, where hundreds of innocent men and women were killed by the Sikh extremist terrorists. So it's not just about freedom of expression or freedom of expression of ideas. It goes beyond that, because India has suffered on account of terror, not only in Jammu and Kashmir, which is again a northern state, but also in Punjab in the 80s. In fact, the outcome of the terror in Punjab was that Prime Minister Indira Gandhi was killed by one of her guards following the crisis in Punjab. So I would say this is not simply about freedom of ideas.
Okay, but let's look at the trip from a wider perspective. Certainly, this issue has tainted for some how the experience went for the past week for the Prime Minister. But overall, were the Indian public, was the Indian media interested? What would the overall perspective be? We certainly have a sense of what you think, but would you say others enjoyed his time there, thought it was positive?
No, I would say the general perception, and this is across political spectrum, whether it's the Congress party, which is the opposition party in India at the moment, or the BJP, which is the ruling party in Delhi right now. The general perception among public also was that Prime Minister Trudeau was not sensitive enough to India's concerns, which was basically that he should have, to begin with, listened and actually gone forward to meet Captain Amrinder Singh, who is Chief Minister of Punjab. And it was, he made it very apparent, Prime Minister Trudeau made it very apparent that he did not want to meet Captain Amrinder Singh because he is vocal against Sikh extremist groups and also has serious concerns about Khalistani elements in Canada
But
who are close to Prime Minister
he
Trudeau.
did in the end meet with him. He did in the end meet with him. He did in the end have a positive meeting with Modi. So things presumably are moving forward on that front between Ottawa and Delhi.
You're right, he met Captain Amrinder Singh in the end, but the fact that he met him only after when so much public pressure had been, built up, and so much, ridicule and mockery had happened over Prime Minister Trudeau's political stance. I don't think he met Captain Amrinder Singh out of his own will or out of his own political insight or political understanding of Indian issues. He met him only under pressure. And the second thing about the perception about his trip was that the general public felt that Prime Minister Trudeau was, making one blunder after another, because after he met Captain Amrinder Singh, we discovered from the Canadian media itself that this ex-convict, ex-terrorist had been invited to the Canadian High Commission dinner. The third point I would say that, in the end, Prime Minister Modi got a joint statement with Prime Minister Trudeau, and it was clear that Prime Minister Trudeau had conceded to every single demand that India had put forward, which was to declare Khalistani elements as terror groups, like, in fact, in the joint statement, two major groups of Sikh extremists were mentioned as terror groups, Babar Khalsa and Sikh Youth Federation. So it seemed that, Prime Minister Trudeau had to give massive concessions, and this does not sort of make him a great world leader.